Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. On an ordinary morning, a local resident was walking his beloved dog. They wandered far from home and enjoyed long walks along the forest paths by the lake. Kaiser Lake, also known as Mosquito Lake, is the main attraction of the Kaiser Lake State Reserve. Located in Ohio, this natural reservoir is surrounded by wooded areas that are both captivating and intimidating. As a result, few people visit, making it an ideal spot for extended walks with pets. The peaceful walk was abruptly interrupted by the dog's persistent barking. The dog yanked the leash and pulled its owner forcefully toward a ravine. The slope was steep, and the dog stopped at the edge, barking loudly and running back and forth along the ridge. When the owner caught up, he looked closely and saw the silhouette of a person in the ravine. The stranger lay face down in an unnatural position, arms and legs splayed as if they had fallen from above. The witness attempted to circle the ravine and climb down on his own, shouting in the hope of getting a response, but there was none. The slope was steep, and the wet grass made it unsafe to descend without equipment. The man reported his find to the emergency services. Rescuers arrived at the lake within 10 minutes. Using special equipment, they retrieved the victim from the bottom of the ravine. It was a young woman. Upon being lifted, she was examined. The strange position in which the witness had found her led rescuers to suspect that she had deprived herself of life. Medical personnel at the scene confirmed the demise of the unidentified girl. The body was taken to the morgue for a forensic examination and to establish the identity of the victim. In the ravine, at the site where the body was found, there was also a log with traces of blood. The unnatural position in which the victim was discovered suggested to investigators that she had fallen from the cliff. However, whether she had done it herself or had been assisted was something the investigation had to determine. A challenging investigation began, but first, they had to establish who the victim was and what had led her to the lake. It didn't take long to identify her. From her clothes and piercings, the identity of the young woman was quickly confirmed. She was Whitney Hostler. It turned out that the young woman had been missing for a day. The forensic report indicated that the cause of death was asphyxiation due to mechanical strangulation. She also had marks on her neck and petechial hemorrhages in her eyes, which fully confirmed asphyxiation. Let's begin to understand, step by step, who deprived this young woman of life and what could have led to such a demise. Whitney Lynn Hostler was born in Dayton, Ohio, on July 27, 1995, to Charles and Kimberly Hostler. She had an older sister, Chelsea, with whom she shared a close bond throughout their lives. When Whitney was only 2 years old, her parents divorced, and the girls went to live with their father. Growing up in a male-dominated household influenced Whitney's behavior. She was a tough and noisy girl who never backed down and defended her boundaries assertively. However, her tomboy nature did not overshadow her creative side, as Whitney loved drawing, coloring, and embroidering. In her teenage years, Whitney reunited with her mother and moved to live with her. Her mother's nurturing care softened her strong personality, and young Whitney gradually became gentle and feminine. She developed an interest in makeup, read romance novels, and dreamed of meeting her soulmate. At 15, she began dating a boy named Ryder. Their relationship developed rapidly and, despite their young age, became quite strong. In 2017, Whitney and Randy learned they were expecting a child. The families of the future parents were delighted and spent 9 months caring for Whitney and anticipating the arrival of the eagerly awaited baby. In the summer of 2018, they welcomed a daughter named Erilyn. After the birth, Whitney moved in with Randy and his parents. Randy Ryder came from a respectable family. His parents, Rodney and Valerie, were retired and happily welcomed their future daughter-in-law and granddaughter. Whitney was already well acquainted with Randy's relatives, and it seemed they were all very close. The young parents had grand plans for the future. They both continued their studies and intended to formalize their relationship soon. However, time passed, and the much-anticipated wedding never happened. Instead, Whitney and Randy's relationship began to deteriorate. Randy frequently disappeared with friends, while Whitney often visited her family, leaving their young daughter in Valerie Ryder's care. Upon returning from a trip to her family, Whitney learned from friends that Randy was being unfaithful. A confrontation erupted between the young parents, during which Randy struck Whitney. Enraged, she threatened to take their child and revoke his parental rights. Arguments became a regular occurrence in the young parents' relationship, much to the disapproval of the elder Ryders. On October 1st, 2020, Whitney planned to move out of the Ryder home into her own apartment. But on September 30th, she mysteriously disappeared. After Whitney Hostler had been out of contact with family and friends for over a day, she was officially declared missing. On the late evening of October 1st, 2020, Randy Ryder appeared at the Champaign County Sheriff's Office and reported the disappearance of his daughter's mother, Whitney Hostler. He explained that following an extended argument between Whitney and his mother, Valerie Ryder, he hurriedly left the house to meet mutual friends, where he was supposed to meet Whitney, but she never showed up. Randy also stated that he spent the rest of the day with friends at a club where he was waiting for Whitney. One of these friends was supposed to pick her up from home, but couldn't reach her because she didn't answer the phone. The police responded quickly to the missing person report and arrived at the Ryder home shortly after midnight to conduct a welfare check. The door was opened by Randy's younger brother, Rodney Jr. He informed the police that he was home alone. He also mentioned that his parents had left several hours ago to look for new hunting spots and had taken little Erilyn with them. Finding it suspicious that the Ryders took their young granddaughter out in the middle of the night, the police decided to wait for their return. While the officers were speaking with Rodney Jr., a white pickup truck pulled into the driveway, containing Rodney Ryder, Valerie Ryder, and their young granddaughter, but Whitney Hostler was not with them. The police questioned them about Whitney and the last time they saw her. Valerie explained that on September 30th, they had a disagreement with Whitney, and she left to meet Randy. Through the window, Valerie saw a dark maroon car pick her up, but she couldn't see the driver because the windows were tinted. Valerie Ryder also told the officers that she received a message from Whitney Hostler saying she would be gone for a while and asking her to look after her daughter. Rodney Sr. and Valerie admitted that they had indeed been driving around looking for new hunting spots and then stopped at a gas station to buy cherry cola. The police were highly suspicious of this story and inspected the outside of the vehicle the couple arrived in. They walked around the truck and shone flashlights into the windows. In the bed of the truck, they saw a garbage bag sealed with duct tape. Stuck in the tape were tufts of light-colored hair that matched Whitney's hair color. The police also found a two-wheeled cart with wet mud on the tires, a green rubber glove, and a single women's sandal. After these discoveries, the officers asked if they could search the house. Without a warrant, they proceeded with extreme caution to avoid alerting potential suspects. Inside the house, the police found an almost empty roll of duct tape near Randy and Whitney's bed. I looked at the bed and saw sewn-together garbage bags with duct tape. I opened those bags and saw large clumps of light-colored hair stuck in the tape, said Investigator Fisher. We knew Whitney was blonde. When I saw the tape and hair, I had a bad feeling about where this was going. The roll of tape caught the officer's attention, but Valerie claimed that it had been cleaning day and the found hair and tape were from her grandchildren. Rodney Jr. confirmed his mother's story, saying that his daughter had been playing with the tape and her hair accidentally got stuck in it. Valerie remained very calm during the conversation and talked a lot, whereas Rodney Sr. was very agitated. He became so distressed by the police questioning that he started hyperventilating and had to be taken to the hospital. Kimberly Long, Whitney's mother, was notified of her daughter's disappearance. She said that Whitney would never leave without her daughter or without telling someone where she was going. Kimberly also mentioned that Whitney was supposed to sign papers and move into her new apartment on October 1st, but she never showed up. Reviewing footage from surveillance cameras in the area, investigators found no sign of the dark maroon car Valerie mentioned, nor did Whitney leave the house that day. The entire Ryder family was called back for questioning. Rodney Jr. was interviewed first. During the conversation, it became clear that he was not involved in Whitney's disappearance. He was at work on September 30th and only saw her in the morning that day. After the interview, he was immediately released. Rodney Sr. confirmed hearing Whitney and Valerie arguing and shouting at each other. He explained that Whitney had found out Randy had been unfaithful to her with another woman who was expecting his child. Whitney loudly declared she was going to take her daughter and move back in with her mother. Valerie said she tried to calm Whitney down, but she was very angry. Randy mentioned that he heard noises coming from his room and then complete silence. He said his father emerged from the bedroom seconds later and told him to leave for a few days and ensure everyone knew where he was. The couple insisted they were genuinely looking for deer hunting spots and were not involved in Whitney's disappearance or her demise. Valerie claimed she saw Whitney leave the house around 11:30 a.m. on September 30th and hadn't seen her since. The police had no concrete evidence that a crime had been committed. Rodney Sr., Valerie, and Randy were released. However, the discovery of Whitney Hostler's body in a wooded ravine near Kaiser Lake Road shortly after she was reported missing, showing clear signs of strangulation, prompted the Ryder family to be called in for further questioning. Rodney Sr. and Valerie were invited for another round of interviews. Investigators focused on Rodney Sr. as he appeared nervous and scared during previous interrogations. They showed him several photos of Whitney's injuries and autopsy photos. When asked if he knew who was responsible for Whitney's death, Rodney Sr. broke down and revealed the truth. According to Rodney Sr., he was awakened on the morning of September 30th by loud female screams. He entered Whitney and Randy's bedroom and saw the women arguing. Not wanting to intervene, he left the room, but a few minutes later, Valerie called him back. When he re-entered, he saw his wife holding a bag over Whitney's head and wrapping it with duct tape. Whitney was already unconscious on the bed. He then recounted how he helped his wife place Whitney's lifeless body into a garbage bag. He confessed to helping Valerie carry the bag outside and put it in the pickup truck. They then drove around for some time, looking for a place to dispose of the body. He said it was Valerie's idea to take Whitney to Kaiser Lake. Whitney's daughter, little Erilyn, was in the car with them at the time and was, of course, completely unaware of the heinous act her grandparents were committing. When the police obtained a confession from Rodney Ryder, they still needed to question Valerie. Valerie continued to repeat the already known story about cleaning and looking for a hunting spot. However, when confronted with her husband's confession on a recorded video, she had no choice but to confess to the crime. She detailed how she tried to hug Whitney and calm her down during the argument, but the young mother was adamant about leaving and vowed never to let them see her daughter again. Valerie said her mind clouded after those words, and she hugged Whitney again, but this time with such force that Whitney couldn't escape her strong grip. She claimed that she didn't realize immediately that she had squeezed the girl's neck too hard, and it was too late when she noticed that Whitney wasn't breathing. Valerie admitted that she was consumed by intense rage at the thought of never seeing her beloved granddaughter again. That same day, Valerie and Rodney Sr. were arrested and charged with premeditated crime, evidence tampering, and desecrating a corpse. After the arrest, several calls came into the police department alleging that Randy was the real criminal and that his mother took the blame to save her son from prison. These suspicions arose from Randy's own statements, where he admitted to being home during the argument between his mother and Whitney. He did not hide this in the initial interrogations, but after charges were brought against his parents, his involvement in Whitney's crime was also considered. Randy reiterated that he heard Whitney's words about suing his family and how they would never see their daughter again. "I heard Whitney in my room saying, 'We'll never see her again,' and that she was suing me for child support and everything," Randy stated during a police interview. "She said she hated our family and that we were disgusting." According to Randy, Rodney Sr. and Valerie practically revolved their lives around the child, said investigator Holmes. They were the guardians of this child. The child often slept in their room with them. Everything in the parents' world centered on this little girl. Randy told the police he heard Whitney shouting at his mother in her bedroom and then heard silence. At that moment, his father left the bedroom. "He grabbed me by the wrists, lifted me, and said literally word for word, 'You need to leave for a few days and make sure everyone knows where you are,'" Randy said during a police interview. In my mind, I took it as if I needed an alibi or something like that. He looked like he had just walked in and seen something he probably never thought he would see. Randy Ryder reluctantly agreed to cooperate with the police and underwent a polygraph test. In this instance, the police stated they believed Randy was genuinely concerned about Whitney's disappearance and his parents' involvement. Randy admitted that losing their granddaughter would be devastating for his parents. There was no basis for Randy's arrest. Yes, he heard the argument and might have suspected, but there was no evidence that he was involved in Whitney's crime. In December 2020, Rodney Ryder Sr. entered a plea deal for obstruction of justice and evidence tampering and was sentenced to 36 months in prison. In February 2021, 52-year-old Valerie Ryder stood trial for the crime of Whitney Hostler, the former girlfriend of her son. The prosecution presented evidence of Randy Sr.'s interrogation and Valerie's confession to Whitney's crime. A key piece of evidence proving Valerie's involvement was a green glove found inside the truck, which contained Valerie's DNA inside and Whitney's DNA outside. Whitney's sister and mother testified at the trial that the young mother suffered from postpartum depression after her daughter's birth and struggled to care for her independently. They also added that Whitney Hostler indeed had issues and disagreements with the elder Ryders and was planning to move out of their home into her apartment with her daughter. Whitney had problems with Valerie in the sense that she was trying to take over her daughter, said Kimberly Long, Whitney Hostler's mother, and keep her for herself. At some point, she wanted Whitney and Randy to sign Erilyn over to her, so Valerie and Rodney could raise her, because they felt Whitney and Randy were not capable of raising her properly, but that was a lie. Valerie Ryder's defense claimed that Randy was the real criminal and that Valerie confessed to the crime to save her son. But during the court hearings, both her husband and Randy were witnesses for the prosecution. Rodney Sr. confessed to witnessing his wife take Whitney's life. He claimed that he was dozing off and was awakened by the argument. When he entered Whitney's room, she was lying on the bed with a bag over her head, and his wife was beside her. Meanwhile, Valerie stated that she struggled with Whitney and at some point realized she wasn't breathing, but she claimed she didn't know how the bag ended up on Whitney's head. Valerie put her in the garbage bag. I just helped her, Rodney Sr. said during the trial. He admitted to helping his wife carry the body to the truck and assisting in taking it to the park, where they threw it off the cliff. On February 25th, after more than 6 hours of deliberation regarding the circumstances surrounding the death of missing young woman Whitney Hostler, a Champaign County jury found a St. Paris resident guilty of taking her life. She was found guilty of taking a life, aggravated assault, evidence tampering, gross abuse of a corpse, and 3 counts of possession of criminal tools. She was found not guilty of taking a life with aggravating circumstances. A charge of taking a life carries a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 15 years. However, for other criminal charges, the defendant may be required to serve an additional 5 years before becoming eligible for parole. The state will request the court to impose the maximum sentence, stated Champaign County Prosecutor Kevin Talebi. Valerie Ryder was also sentenced to 3 years in prison for using a firearm as part of her 3 charges, adding another 3 years consecutively to her prison term. This clarification was added because evidence showed that Valerie Ryder's husband, Rodney Ryder, who had pleaded guilty in this case, had a firearm on him during the crime. On March 1st, 2021, after a 4-day trial and a 6-hour jury deliberation, Champaign County Common Pleas Court Judge Nick Salvaggio delivered the final verdict in the case concerning the death of 25-year-old Whitney Lynn Hostler. Valerie Ryder was found guilty of taking a life, aggravated assault, evidence tampering, and gross abuse of a corpse. She was sentenced to 21 years in prison. She will be eligible for parole in 2041. We were very pleased with the verdict, said Prosecutor Kevin Talebi. After the hearing, he also stated that he had spoken with the victim's family, and they were also satisfied with the verdict. Defense attorney Gregory Harvey stated that although they were not satisfied with the overall verdict, they were content with the outcome of the case. Gregory Harvey also said that Whitney's case was very complex and emotional. It wasn't what we wanted, but we were satisfied with the finding of not guilty for taking a life with aggravating circumstances, he said. While we disagree with the verdict, we must respect it. What happened to Whitney Hostler was absolutely tragic, he added. I'm glad we were able to achieve justice for Whitney. Despite not being satisfied with the results of the other charges, Gregory Harvey said he believes that Valerie will continue to maintain her innocence in the future. He added that in her own testimony, his client was simply trying to diffuse the situation between her son Randy Ryder and Whitney Hostler, and that she was merely trying to defend her family. In his closing statement, Kevin Talibi said that based on the evidence, Valerie Ryder choked Whitney for nearly a minute, placing her hand under her neck and squeezing until she lost consciousness. During the sentencing, Valerie Ryder apologized to Champaign County Common Pleas Judge Nick Salvaggio. I want to say how very sorry I am for what I did after Whitney's death. I deeply regret my actions, Valerie Ryder said during sentencing. I express my deepest condolences to her family. Rodney Sr. was released from prison on March 28, 2023. Chelsea Hostler was granted custody of Whitney and Randy's daughter. Sadly, there are many such fatal stories. The older generation often believes they have the right to dictate how their grown children should live and even demand custody of their grandchildren. But the story of an adult woman, mother, and grandmother, Valerie Ryder, is shocking in its audacity. A woman from Ohio committed a horrifying crime, tormented by the thought of losing contact with her 2-year-old granddaughter. It's terrifying to think that Whitney and Randy's daughter was in the car when they drove with her mother's body to dispose of it like trash. If they truly loved their granddaughter as much as they claimed, they wouldn't have done this. It seemed that the entire Ryder family's world revolved around this granddaughter, or perhaps Valerie felt she absolutely needed to control the situation in her son's relationship with Whitney. It's unclear exactly when the relationship between the Ryder and Hostler families turned sour. It's evident that things became so bad within the family that Valerie was willing to deprive someone of life to keep her granddaughter. Rodney Ryder's sentence is noteworthy. Yes, he did come forward to the police, but 36 months is not a long time to serve for the crime he committed. He didn't stop the women, nor did he report the incident to the authorities. Instead, he drove to Kaiser Lake and helped his wife cover up what they had done. Some might argue that Rodney Sr. was afraid of his wife, but it's clear that he willingly helped her out of cowardice. Randy Ryder was never charged in connection with the crime. In stories like this, it's always shocking how cold-blooded criminals act after committing such acts. Wrapping the girl's body in bags, driving her to the cliff, and then discarding her like an object. This is what's astounding. At one time, they loved Whitney, welcomed her into the family, celebrated holidays together, and cared for their granddaughter. How is it possible to act so coldly, just hours after everyone woke up and had coffee, and then a few hours later were placing a body in the trunk? How could this crime have been committed in a fit of rage and not premeditated if Valerie put a bag over the girl's head and wrapped it with tape? Think about it. We don't carry tape and large garbage bags in our pockets just in case. Tragically, because of her grandmother's fatal decision, a little girl has lost her mother and will likely never see her grandmother, grandfather, and father, who once cared for her and perhaps even loved her. Every year, many people lose their lives in custody battles. The most important thing is that the children do not become happier. Instead, they become orphans with psychological issues. Under the guise of caring for the girl, the elder Ryders committed a brutal crime. What were they hoping for? It's obvious that beyond the custody battle, there was an underlying hatred and animosity. Undoubtedly, in this story of two families fighting for custody, there is only one true loser. Of course, it is the little girl who will never know the warmth of her mother's embrace. We can only hope that when she grows up, she won't remember the selfishness with which adults tried to use her, all while professing their love. If the family truly loved the child, they would have tried to build a normal relationship for her sake, but they acted only to satisfy their egos. Whitney Hostler was a beloved mother, daughter, and sister. She will be greatly missed by all who knew and loved her. Thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to my channel. There are many shocking stories ahead of you.